I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, San Diego police get the official word on where their pay ranks compared to other departments. We'll also update you on the race for the 52nd Congressional District. It's been too close to call. San Diego taxi drivers staged dueling protests over a plan to offer more permits in the downtown area. And Camp Pendleton marks a symbolic end to the war in Afghanistan with a homecoming celebration.
So at that point I realized, if I don't get out of here, he's going to kill me this time. So I got up and I ran to the street.
A former student tells us her story of sexual assault and her search for justice at San Diego State. And tonight we remember a true San Diego original. Longtime journalist Larry Himmel has died. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego Police Department has struggled to recruit and retain officers for years now. Police have complained it's due to low pay. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto tells us a long-anticipated survey released today confirms what they've been saying. Taryn, what does the survey tell us?
Dwayne, the survey revealed that San Diego's officers make the least or nearly the least among the 19 agencies. That includes cities from around the state, such as San Francisco and Los Angeles, and other cities in the county, including Carlsbad, Oceanside, and Chula Vista.
And how does San Diego compare to those other agencies in this study?
One of the things that the study looked at was base pay. It compared base pay for 8 positions in the department, from a recruit all the way up to a captain. So out of the 19 agencies, a police officer 1 or 2 earns the least, while a recruit is second to last. Higher ranking positions in the department fared a little better, but as you can see, not by much.
So what happens next?
In a statement, Mayor Kevin Faulconer said he's committed to working with the police department and the officers union to find a solution. City leaders and the Police Officers Association have met in the past, but the union is expected to file an official request to renegotiate compensation by next week.
KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto. State Senator Ben Hueso was supposed to be in court today, but his court date was delayed again until December 18th. Hueso was arrested in late August, if you recall, on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol. He was charged with 2 counts, but was offered a lesser charge with no jail time. That lesser charge would still include 3 years of informal probation. It's the second time the hearing has been delayed. District Attorney has filed charges against Padre shortstop Everett Cabrera, charges including resisting arrest and possession of marijuana. Cabrera was stopped back in September. He was cited on suspicion of DUI and later released. If convicted, Cabrera could face 1 year in jail. San Diego cab drivers staged a protest drive today through downtown. They're angry about a city proposal to eliminate a cap on the number of taxi permits issued for the downtown area. City Council will consider the plan on Monday. Drivers who already have their medallions or permits say the market is already overcrowded.
We got 3,000 Uber and ex-Uber, and we have Lyft, and we have pedicabs, we have shuttles. What are you going to put all these vehicle and transportation vehicle on this road?
Drivers without medallions staged a counter-protest near Petco Park. They say they've been forced to work long hours to pay their leases. Monday's meeting is expected to draw a huge crowd, so it's being moved to Golden Hall to make sure there's enough room. The cost of college could go up at University of California schools. KPBS education reporter Matt Bowler joins us from the newsroom and says the UC system and governor are at odds over money.
Tuition costs could go up by as much as 5% at all UC schools every year for the next 4 years if the plan put forward by the UC Board of Regents passes. That means a UC San Diego freshman who spends $12,192 for their first year could spend $14,819 for their last. Governor Brown's budget did give the UC system a 5% increase last year, 5% this year, and the plan is to give them 4% over the following 2 years. But the University of California Executive Vice President Nathan Bronstrom says that's not enough.
The general fund increased at roughly double the amount that higher ed is increasing, and so that's it's a little bit incredulous to say that this is a promise for higher education.
H.D. Palmer is the Deputy Director of the State Department of Finance, and he's taking point on this for Governor Brown. Palmer says the governor is opposed to any tuition increase.
In fact, increased funding for UC in the governor's budget is, in fact, contingent upon tuition remaining flat.
Lynn O'Shaughnessy is a higher education author and consultant. She says parents and students need to broaden their college search.
Get the heck out of California. That's what I tell people. Get out. I mean, why just limit yourself to the California schools?
The tuition hike proposal goes before the UC Regents on November 19th. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
It was homecoming day at Camp Pendleton for about 70 members of the 1st Marine Brigade Headquarters Unit. They're back from Helmand Province after turning Camp Leatherneck over to Afghan forces. Peggy Pico has more on the symbolic end of the Marines' part in Afghanistan.
An estimated 76,000 Marines served in Afghanistan during the 13-year war. One Marine expressed his homecoming like this.
Ready to go. I got a 8-month-old little boy at home. I missed 7 months of his life so far, so ready to not be here ever again.
My guest, Tony Perry, LA Times San Diego Bureau Chief, was embedded with Marines in Afghanistan 7 times. Thanks so much for joining us, Tony.
Pleasure.
Now, what role did Camp Pendleton Marines play in America's longest-running war?
Oh, a major role. They were among the first conventional troops in after 9/11. The Special Forces, including the SEALs from Coronado, they were already there. But in terms of conventional troops, the Marines from Camp Pendleton were among the first. Took over a place called Camp Rhino, and from there in Kandahar. And then were there from 2001, 2004. Then pretty much they shifted to Iraq. 2009, they came back in large numbers and fought some of the bloodiest battles of the Afghan war in Helmand Province at Sangin, Marja, and then a lot of smaller conflicts.
And Helmand Province was considered one of the most dangerous and deadly places to be. I think Pendleton's 3rd Battalion, 5th Regiment suffered the highest casualty rate of any unit in Afghanistan.
Indeed.
And what made it so dangerous?
Well, Helmand Province was and still is a Taliban hotspot. It's their sort of spiritual capital, if you will. They also have sanctuary in Pakistan. There's also the farmers that grow the poppy crop that turns into heroin, that turns into a lot of money for narco criminals and for the Taliban. They were very infested in Helmand Province, and they didn't give it up easy. And now that the Marines and the Brits are leaving, they want it back. So we will now see whether the Afghan force, trained, equipped by the Americans, by the Marines, by the Army, by the Brits, is up to the task.
What are you hearing from the Marines who are actually returning home? Is the transition coming back to the U.S. and getting into civilian life any easier now?
It's never an easy transition. They come back to an unsettled future. The economy of this country is sort of limping along. They're reducing the numbers in the active duty force. So a lot of them have to say, well, okay, I fought a couple of wars. Do I get to stay in, or am I going to be booted out? Their future is uncertain. But they also come back to a country that is appreciative, a military that has, I think, to a large degree, stepped up in terms of medical, psychological support, family support. Navy Hospital over here in Balboa Park, the same. Is it enough? No, probably not. The problems of combat are going to be with us a long time.
And getting back to Afghanistan and what you mentioned, is there a sense from the military that these Marines accomplished what they set out to accomplish and this mission is over?
I think there is a great sense that they pushed the Taliban out of Helmand Province, that they wrested that area away at great price. Some 422 Marines killed in Afghanistan, about a quarter of them from Camp Pendleton. Bloody battles at Sangin and Marja and a lot of other places. They pushed them out. Now, they're pushing back in. Will the Afghan forces, now that we're pretty much gone, will they be up to repelling them? We're going to find out.
And military, do they say anything on that? Do they feel, is the bravado there, or are they really concerned that this will...
They're guarded.
Okay.
They're cautious and they're guarded. And the Afghans have suffered a lot of casualties. And the word now is that sustainable? Can they continue to lose thousands of their people in combat with the Taliban or not? There are predictions on both sides. There are predictions that they're going to fall apart. Then again, there's predictions that we've underestimated them and they are going to step up. We'll see.
What about the impact of such a long war here on the Marines, on the military? Has it impacted the military itself?
Well, it's impacted it enormously, but again, I think in terms of the Marines, they've stepped up to the challenge. They've made Camp Pendleton is no longer just a military base, it's a community. They're welcoming. Is it enough for guys and women that are going to have to struggle with PTSD, traumatic brain injury? We're going to find out, but I think they've stepped up. Remember, too, that we've been out, for example, of Iraq for several years, and in a few years, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find a Marine enlisted who went to Iraq because they have great turnover. And so in a few years, Iraq, to most of the enlisted, is going to be something they're taught about in boot camp, but they didn't experience.
All right, LA Times San Diego Bureau Chief Tony Perry, thanks so much for the update.
My pleasure.
And as promised, we have new numbers tonight in the 52nd congressional district race. Democrat Congressman Scott Peters has grabbed the lead over his Republican challenger, Carl DeMaio. Peters is now up by 861 votes, but the race is still too close to call. Longtime San Diego journalist Larry Himmel has died of cancer. He worked for Channel 8 for 35 years, first hosting a program called San Diego at Large, then becoming a feature reporter, telling stories in a way no one else could.
What day is it?
It's Hump Day. Oh my God!
It's Hump Day.
Himmel was best known for making people laugh, but 7 years ago, people cried as he watched his home destroyed by the Witch Creek fire.
I got a lot of support from people like you, strangers who reached out to us, and
We were all praying for you, brother.
well, I know. I felt it. I felt it. I wouldn't have got through it without it. But this is what is left of my home, just outside the Forest Ranch area.
Yeah, as you can see, he kept on reporting about that fire, even got an Emmy Award for it in 2008. Himmel also did sports and weather for Channel 8. On his official station bio, he said, quote, "I've managed to live my entire life without having a real job." Larry Himmel was 68. When a college student is sexually assaulted, it's not just the police that get involved. Universities have to conduct hearings to deal with these accusations. A student who is found guilty could be expelled. KPBS reporter Angela Carone follows the case of one woman who went through the process at San Diego State. Her case was some years ago, but the school hasn't had a hearing on a rape case since. We want to warn you, viewers may find parts of this story disturbing.
It was after midnight in September 2007 when a 20-year-old woman ran out of what was then the Sigma Pi fraternity house onto the street near SDSU. She was barefoot and crying. She was running from her boyfriend of almost a year. 2 students saw her and called 911.
And then I just kind of collapsed on my knees after I heard them calling 911 because I knew now that the police have been called, there's no going back. There's no more hiding this from people. There's no more hiding it from my friends.
She'd managed to hide how controlling he was, how abusive. But that weekend, the abuse got worse.
So he threw me against the wall, and then he picked me up again and then threw me on the floor, and I landed on my back. And then I looked up at him, and he was reaching for his huge TV, and I knew he was going to throw it on me. So at that point I realized, like, if I don't get out of here, he's going to kill me this time. So I got up and I ran to the street.
When the police arrived, she revealed something else. The night before, she said her boyfriend raped and sodomized her. KPBS agreed to protect her identity because she says she was sexually assaulted. She asked us to call her Jennifer, not her real name. Her boyfriend was arrested within hours but released on bail the next day. That meant he would be back on campus. Jennifer filed a complaint with the school's Title IX office. That launched a process typical on college campuses. There would be an investigation and possibly a hearing. These hearings and how colleges handle them are just one of the reasons over 80 schools are being investigated by the federal government. The results of Jennifer's hearing might look like vindication. She says the process rarely felt like justice. Jennifer ended up dropping out of school that fall semester.
I tried to be on campus, but the worst part of it was not only him being on campus, but his entire fraternity was going out of their way to harass me.
His fraternity brothers taunted her on campus. She says one threatened to hit her. She was able to get a 5-year restraining order against her ex-boyfriend. So why would a guy accused of a violent crime not be charged and waiting to go on trial?
There's a very strong burden of proof in criminal court, beyond reasonable doubt.
Jessica Pride is a civil attorney. She says cases like this one and many campus sexual assault cases never make it to court.
Most sexual assaults occur with only 2 people in the room. You know, it's a he said, she said.
Which is what the DA's office told Jennifer when they dropped the charges in her case. But the campus judicial process is different. Gail Mendez is an attorney with the local rape crisis center.
There's a different standard of proof, and it's a different process. For a campus to find that the accused is guilty, they only need to find it by a preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not.
Jennifer's hearing took place in this room. Today's hearings happen much the same way. The main people in the room are an SDSU staff member who gets 3 to 4 hours of training each year and presides over the hearing like a judge. There's a Title IX coordinator who investigated the case and kind of acts like a prosecutor. The accused can have an attorney, but Jennifer says she was told she couldn't have one. An armed police officer was also in the room, only because she asked for that to make her feel safe. Without an attorney, Jennifer felt vulnerable.
They kept asking about why I would go back to him the second night if he had raped me the previous night. So as a victim, I had to kind of explain to them that that's how domestic violence works.
Joe Cohn is a policy director at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. He says these hearings aren't fair to the victim or the accused. They're meant to deal with things like cheating on a paper. They're not designed to handle complex felonies.
Especially when they're trying to do this without the benefit of forensics evidence, without the benefit of years of expertise, and without the benefit of the tools that law enforcement professionals and courts bring to bear to sort out fact and fiction. Expecting them to do this well is crazy.
Lee Mintz is SDSU's deputy Title IX coordinator who investigated Jennifer's case. Mintz would only talk generally about the process. She said not to compare what the schools do to the courts. The goal, she said, is different.
If you think of, let's say, a defendant and an attorney, the goal of the attorney is to get their client off of these charges. Our goal is, regardless of what kind of the outcome is, we want the entire process to be educational.
After Jennifer's hearing ended in January, she waited for a decision. She was back at school. Her ex-boyfriend left for an SDSU study abroad program in Spain. He declined to be interviewed for this story. Jennifer was supposed to get the results from the hearing in 15 days. Weeks later, she still hadn't heard.
I would call like once a week asking for a decision. I would email asking what's going on. Why has there not been a decision made?
7 months after she first filed her complaint, Jennifer got a call. Her ex-boyfriend was found guilty and would be expelled. But there was one other thing. Jennifer says Mintz told her she couldn't tell anyone in order to protect the accused's privacy rights.
He's telling all his friends a completely different story than what happened. And I'm not allowed to say, no, look, the school believes me. I went through this hearing and they believed me. They saw all the evidence and they expelled him.
This kind of verbal non-disclosure agreement violates federal guidelines. SDSU did not respond to questions on whether the policy has changed. Even though Jennifer's ex-boyfriend was expelled, he went on to finish his undergrad and get a law degree from George Washington. Just this summer, he sat for the California bar exam in the same room as Jennifer.
out of the huge room, he ended up in the row right in front of me, directly in front of me.
Today, Jennifer works at a law firm. Her college experiences, both good and bad, have taught her that justice is complicated, slippery even. In a few weeks, the names of those who passed the California bar exam will be made public. Jennifer will learn whether both she and the man who was expelled from college for sexually assaulting her will be able to practice law in the state of California. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour. Live 10 years after a devastating tsunami. How one Indonesian community copes. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
Well, 1 year ago this week, residents in the Philippines were dealt a virtual death blow by Typhoon Haiyan, the most destructive storm ever to strike that region of the Pacific. Today, neighbors are looking back. Ned Barker of the Associated Press brings us the story.
These are happier times for David Saavedra and his family. They all survived Typhoon Haiyan, the most ferocious typhoon ever to hit the Philippines. It came ashore a year ago this week. This is what it looked like from inside the family's home. David Saavedra took a selfie with his mother and sister as a way to say goodbye to their older sister Sarah, who was in Manila.
I just want to smile just for the world to see that we're happy after all this, and at least I have that calmness already in me.
I said, Lord, if this is my last, forgive me for everything.
Although the Saavedras survived, thousands perished. Gerardo Basila, a local fisherman, lost his 19-year-old son in the storm. He disappeared and was never found.
It really hurts. I say to myself that I wasn't able to save my own son.
Feeling blessed, David's older sister Sarah created a nonprofit group to help her family's hometown rebuild. Among the organization's projects, distributing boats to fishermen like Barcilla.
It's fulfilling to see the happiness in the faces of people when before, after Typhoon Haiyan, all you see in their eyes it seemed like they were walking dead.
Life has returned to normal during the past year, but the typhoon's fury will never be forgotten. More than 4 million Filipinos were displaced following the storm. The death toll, more than 7,300. Ned Barker, The Associated Press.
If you're traveling for Thanksgiving, get ready for bigger crowds at airports this year. The worst day is expected to be November 30th, Sunday after Thanksgiving, when over 2 million Americans are expected to fly. Padres are installing a giant video screen at Petco Park. It's part of an effort to improve the 10-year-old ballpark. Everything should be in place for the home opener next year. The new HD screen will be the third largest in Major League Baseball and 5 times larger than the current board. The team says it can show live action, video replays, and stats. Looks like our mild Santa Ana is coming to a close, and that red flag warning has expired for the valley and mountain areas. Looking at 80s along the coast tomorrow with a slight cool down for the weekend. Sunday, mid-70s at the beaches. 80s with sunshine for the inland valleys, slightly cooler on Sunday. Pleasant in the mountains, low 70s there. Warm in the desert, upper 80s on Sunday with some clouds. Let's recap our top stories tonight. New numbers are out in the 52nd congressional district race. Democratic Congressman Scott Peters has grabbed the lead over his Republican challenger Carl DeMaio. Peters is now up by 861 votes, but the race is still too close to call. A city-funded study says San Diego's police officers are underpaid compared to other departments in the county and state. It found officers' pay ranks near or at the bottom among 18 other departments in California. And UC California system is proposing a tuition increase. It could be as much as 5% a year over the next 5 years. Governor Brown is opposed to the idea. For dozens of Marine families, this was the best day ever as they welcomed their loved ones home from Helmand Province. Today's return at Camp Pendleton marks the symbolic end to the Marine Corps' involvement in the war in Afghanistan. And longtime San Diego journalist Larry Himmel has died of cancer. He worked at Channel 8 for 35 years, reporting on everything from features to weather to sports and to the destruction of his own home during the witch fire in 2007. He died last night. He was 68. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. We leave you tonight with a performance by Joseph Spacek with the Czech Philharmonic. The orchestra is in San Diego tonight for the beginning of the new celebrity orchestra season for the La Jolla Music Society. Wish you a good night.